Howdy guys, welcome back to Deal by Deal episode 12. The year is 2012 and this is a single family residence that I actually used as my primary residence since then. The way I found this property is that I was actually driving down the street and saw the for sale by owner sign. I was driving for FedEx at the time, and so I was making a delivery or a pickup, and I was going up the road and saw this sign out front. It said 125K OF, which I assumed and was correct in meaning that he was willing to owner finance the property, which is, one of my favorite things, of course. So even at the time, $125,000 for a house that was that large was a really good deal. So I figured it needed work, and it did. As soon as I could get in, as soon as he had an appointment available for me to take a look at the property, I knew that I wanted it. It was quite a project, but not crazy. It was livable mostly because it was summertime. So we had to get the heat figured out. We had to repair the roof, a bunch of cosmetic stuff, flooring, paint, things like that. But it was a great opportunity because he was willing to owner finance it to me with pretty reasonable terms. Also, real quick, if you weren't aware, I do offer coaching, and I've got some online courses and webinars. If you're interested in learning more about how I've done so many of these deals, or if you're interested in investing yourself, please hit me up there. So when we closed on this deal, we were able to get it for pretty reasonable terms, and the final purchase price was $123,000 after the home inspection showed a few more things that we didn't see while we were walking through. Got a couple $1,000s down, but what made it a great deal other than the price was the terms. So we were paying 6% interest, had 2 years to get it refinanced, and we moved in right away. One of the two bathrooms was working. It was a 5-bedroom, 2-bath house on a garage, on an acre with a 3-car garage. So it was a pretty good deal for us, exactly what we needed and the price that was affordable at the time. But we had to get our other house that we owned, we had to get that rented as quick as possible so we didn't have 2 mortgage payments. So we ended up moving like everything we owned into the garage of this new house so we could get that rented while we worked on it. So 2 of the bedrooms were livable enough with flooring that worked. We got one of the bathrooms working and about half the kitchen, so it was livable, but we're kind of just camping in the part of the house that worked. So we did flooring, paint, heater work, plumbing, roof, put a big fence around about 2/3 of the acre so that, get a dog and all that. So we put a lot of work into it, did windows too, did a lot of the labor ourselves to save on costs and ended up spending about $30,000 on top of the purchase price. So all day long we were into it for a little over $150, and then when we refinanced about a year and a half after we purchased it, I think it appraised for like $230 or $240. So we made basically $80,000 equity there for our efforts and the work that we had put into it. So we've lived there since then, and that was over 10 years ago. And so the property has gone up in value, probably $125,000 or more on top of the money that we made, for our initial effort that we put into it. So this property has literally made us more than $200,000 in equity since we've lived there. Our mortgage is like $900 for this nice house. And when we do eventually go to sell it, because of the tax laws, we won't have to pay capital gains on all those hundreds of thousands of dollars because those are primary residents. So that's a pretty huge benefit. A lot of investors will actually buy a house every few years to live in and flip, and that's pretty good strategy if you're okay with moving all the time. It's not really for me, but this really shows the power of how much money you can make without paying taxes on it legitimately and doing it that way. Here's a little backstory on that property, which is relevant for investors everywhere. You probably are aware that when properties go into foreclosure in Alaska, like a lot of states, they end up putting them on auction. So if the person doesn't get caught up on the foreclosure, they go to auction, and if nobody buys them at auction, then the lien holder actually gets the property back. So that's kind of going off on a squirrel chase there. But that's what had happened to this property before I had purchased it from. The guy I had purchased it from had bought it at a foreclosure auction for cash. It's a very interesting investment strategy. There's risks and rewards involved with that, just like any other investment strategy. But he kind of does this as his profession, is to buy these properties at auction. So he bought this home at auction, and I don't know what the price was that he'd gotten it for. and then he turned around and sold it to some folks before we bought it. So several years before we bought it, he sold it to some folks on owner financing. So he had collected payments for a while and a down payment, and it eventually didn't work out, and he ended up having to foreclose and get it back again, and they didn't treat it well. They didn't finish the project, which is why it wasn't in good shape when I got it. And so when he sold it to me, it had actually been foreclosed on twice. And that's not super relevant to the story from where I stepped in, but it's really neat to see kind of the history of how, like, from his perspective as a professional investor, he's made money on this property, multiple times. So he bought it at a good deal, sold it on owner finance. He actually, when he sold it the first time, for the down payment, he received, instead of cash, he received a real estate note on a different property. So he took that note as down payment, and then he had a note on both properties. So he had income coming in from two different streams there, and good collateral, because if any of them didn't pay, he ended up getting the property back that we later purchased and got to resell it on owner finance. So it's kind of a neat mix between two different investment strategies, one being buying them at foreclosure auction, which is pretty cool, and the other one is selling it on owner finance, which has been my claim to fame and kind of my go-to card to purchase and sell on owner finance for years. If you're following along, you'll see so much more that I've done with the owner finance over the years. But his whole game, his angle was the auctions, and if you do that right, you can also make a lot of money. So anyways, just kind of a neat little side note there on that property. And one more side note to this property is that I've used it for collateral on other investments as well. So what I did on this property after I had owned it for a while and have that equity in it, I actually got a home equity line of credit, since it's my primary residence, as a second position lien against the property. So now I have this money that I'm not paying interest on unless and when I borrow against it. And then when deals pop up that I need to write a cash offer for, I can get a 90% letter from the bank saying, hey, I've got the funds available. And so I've used that a couple different times, where I've used the cash from that to buy another investment to make me a bunch of money there. And what's cool is that the interest, again, isn't being paid until I borrow. So it's not like, if I just refinanced it, pulled out a bunch of money and had it sit in the bank, it'd cost me money every month. But this way, it only costs me money when it's making me money. So neat side note there, if you got a bunch of equity in your house, that's a great way to help you get a leg up on some cheap, easy capital for investing. Thanks for following along. I've got this story and all the other deal by deal stories in a long and short version on these different mediums here. So wherever you like to take in your content, please like and subscribe. It really helps. Appreciate you guys. Have an awesome week.